Logic and electrics in No Man's Sky can be complicated when you don't have the background, and despite how complex it might seem at first, it all boils down to understanding the basic functions. So if this is new to you or a concept that is tough to understand, I would advise you to check out this guide where I go over some basics of each switch and how they function. Today we will be talking about a few advanced solutions, which are multi-location control, running and fill lights, and a simple memory bank. To start off, let me show you why multi-location control is a nice idea. If I enable this wall switch, the light will turn on. The problem is, with this light now turned on, and I go to another room, there is no way for me to turn that light off again. I will have to go back to that wall switch and turn it off here. This can be a bit of a pain if you have a large base and you want to turn off the light on one location where you enter it, and on the other location where you go outside, you want to turn off the light again. This is where the following installation comes in handy. Before I demonstrate how it works, let me explain how it works. When pressing the button, a pulse will be sent in two directions. First to the inverter here, and also to the auto switch here. As the auto switch needs its control point to be powered to allow power to flow through, this is currently a dead end. The inverter, however, will natively allow power to flow through, and it will power up the pill light at the end of the circuit. In the meantime, it will also activate both auto switches here and here, plus activating itself as well. This will result in the power being interrupted coming from here. Still, the power to the pill light will be sustained by the auto switch here, as it now has bridged itself. That bridge also keeps this auto switch activated and leaves the power interrupted on this inverter here. This circuit will now stay in this stage until we press the button again. When pressing a button in this stage, the power will flow in two directions again. But as this inverter is interrupted, the only way the power can flow through is the auto switch here, which is now activated. This results in the power following the conduits and activating the inverter here, which in return interrupts the power of the circuit and resets to the original state, and the pill light turns off. The advantage of this installation is that you can add more buttons in parallel to allow you to control the light from different locations. The next installation creates a running light. Let me explain you how this works. When pressing this button, a pulse will be sent through it to this auto switch here. The pulse will now activate the auto switch, which will allow the power to flow through and turn on the pill light. However, as the button only sends through a pulse, the auto switch will interrupt the power again after a second and the pill light will turn off. But as we do have a bridge from the first auto switch to control the second one, this auto switch will in the meantime have powered up this pill light and the following auto switch, very similar to the pulse we sent through the button. This will continue the sequence until the last light. After that, there will be no more pulses to keep this sequence going. We can of course create a loop by connecting the final output of the last auto switch to the output of the button. The power sent from the auto switch will now restart the sequence and create a loop. This sequence will go on until the power is interrupted. The following installation is a fill sequence. Compared with our previous circuit, the light or switch will not turn off but stay triggered. It will just continue feeding the sequence until it's powered off again. This is because we bridge the output of the auto switches to their own control point, which keeps the power flowing through them. Because there seems to be a delay between activation of the auto switch and it allowing power to flow through, it is also possible to create this sequence. Again, this circuit will stay powered until it's interrupted here at the main, or when the inverter here gets a pulse. We can either install a button to do this manually, or we can create a loop again by using the final output to reset this circuit. The final sequence might look complicated, but it's not too difficult to understand. Let us split up the circuit into different parts. The first part here are the two inverters here and here. When power is sent to them, they each have their own purpose. The first inverter on top is bridged on itself, which will result in the inverter interrupting itself when powered. This will result in this inverter pulsing every second. The bottom inverter is a reset. It keeps power flowing through it until the control point gets a pulse and interrupts the flow. The second part is actually three of the same circuits in series. Once you understand the first one, the second and third one have the same function. Let's begin with the top side, where the inverter here is sending a steady pulse onto. This pulse will first of all reach the auto switch here and the inverter here. The auto switch, not being powered, will have no effect for now. But the inverter will allow the pulse to be sent through. This inverter will now activate this auto switch here, which already has power waiting to be let through. The power will first of all bridge the auto switch, keeping it activated, and that will send power to this auto switch here, ready for the next pulse. But it also will have sent power to the pill light here, turning it on. Apart from that, it also, in the meantime, interrupted this inverter and activated this auto switch here. This auto switch will now also stay activated and allow power to be sent through it. It is just waiting for the next pulse coming from this inverter here. Once the pulse is sent, it will just do the same sequence again as I explained before. In this example, we only have 3 memory banks, but it's possible to expand on it by adding more of these sequences to it. Now, you might be wondering what is the purpose of this, as it just seems like a complicated version of the fill light here. Well, this is because we are sending through a 1-second pulse. We could, however, exchange this pulse with a button that can count how many times the button was pressed. Or we can connect our fill sequence here instead of the 1-second pulse. This will then instead remember every time 6 seconds have passed. This installation can be very handy in making clocks or timers, as now you can connect another installation like this behind this pulse, and then it can remember that 18 seconds have passed once each run has done. This might of course be a little too complicated, and with the byte beats now, this can be much simplified. It is still interesting to understand all of this, as there are some great things that can be done with it. I would advise you to go and check out Nolinder, just to see what fantastic things you can create with logic switches in No Man's Sky. I hope this guide was interesting enough to keep you watching till the end, and I hope my explanation was not too confusing. These were advanced applications of logic in No Man's Sky. If you want to learn more about this, then check out one of these guides. If you're still here, then I'm sure you liked it, so don't forget to show that by hitting that like. Thank you so much for watching. This was Beeblebum. Goodbye for now.